For our COBT viewers and listeners, it's Maynard, Jeff, and Mike here with a dear friend and someone who can really help us think about the way the world has evolved over the last 5 years. We had Secretary Wright last year for our 5th anniversary show, having Scott Tinker to talk with us about where we go from here, where he goes from here. I just can't think of a better person to reflect on all this stuff. And Scott, I'll tell you, ironically, you were the first person we met in our lives who was trying to convey a sense of, here's how to think through all this, here's how to find balance, here's some things to remember, here's why physics is a tough thing to change. So you were the original kind of pragmatic thinker, and now here we are in the age of pragmatism. So anyway, it's a long way of saying we're delighted to have Scott, and he's also the CEO of a new thing called Energy Corps, which we'll talk about today. So anyway, Scott, let me just say it's great to have you.
I'm just happy to be here.
You're like, Maynard, can you get to the point?
No, keep talking. It's going. You're sounding great.
It's really fun, and we've got him here in the studio, so it really makes it fun. Yeah. Mike and Jeff, before we jump in with Scott, what would you tell us about the markets or anything else on your mind?
Well, obviously you can tell by my sunburn that I'm just back from Panama. And so the good news is that their social security issues are behind them, and Molina is going to be now focusing his efforts on the Cobre Panama mine, the closure of that and maybe opening that mine. So something to be thinking about for our mining partners. As far as the markets go, bond markets in particular, tomorrow is the FOMC meeting. Most people expect there's going to be no rate cuts, no rate increases either. And I think the issue that's going to start to weigh on people is the economic data that we've seen over the last couple of weeks has been really, really bearish. And you saw inflation, CPI and PPI came in below estimates. And so it does look like the U.S. economy is slowing. The numbers don't look good. Retail sales look bad. Consumer confidence look bad. So I think there's going to be some rate cuts at some point in the future. And so don't be surprised if they don't cut rates tomorrow, that Trump's going to be saying something on Wednesday. So that's it with bonds. I'd say as far as equities, the broader market today is all about NVIDIA. We've always seemed to be talking about NVIDIA, but they have this yearly GTC conference. They're talking there. They're introducing new products. And interestingly enough, the last 2 or 3 times they've hosted this event, the stock is up pretty nicely. Today it's down. And so the stock, it just kind of tells you where the stock market is. And something we've been talking about for several weeks is this new term called Trumpitility, right? Just Trump is introducing a lot of volatility in the market. And until people get really kind of start getting comfortable with this volatility, I think the market's going to kind of go sideways. We're off 9% from year-to-date highs, and so we'll have to see how that develops over the next couple of weeks. I say as far as the crude oil markets, we're at $67 a barrel today. Back to what we just talked about, volatility. Most people, we were at the Sarah conference this last week. I think a lot of people were talking about oil demand peaking this decade. That was new for me. And I think what you're seeing is a market that's oversupplied right now. And in several conversations, we heard people talking about, we think crude oil is going into the 50s. And obviously, crude oil is oversupplied. We will have to see what happens with the OPEC production increases. But the wild card right now is Iran. What are we going to do with Iran? And so we'll have to see what happens there in the next couple of weeks. And so the one last thing I'd say is maybe on Sarah Week conference or Sarah Week. And Scott can probably talk to this as well. But I think this energy transition is essentially dead. It's all now about energy addition. We kept hearing that, and obviously that is a very, very good development. So we'll just hand it back to you.
Awesome. Jeff, what would you throw in?
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on what both of you guys said. You mentioned the word pragmatism or pragmatic. And I wasn't at Sarah Week, but I was reading all the notes coming out of there, and I didn't know why that word bothered me. So I just pulled out my thesaurus, and the first 3 words as synonyms for pragmatic are realistic, sensible, and logical. So it's fundamentally, it's just kind of saying, okay, now the rise of pragmatism says we were not doing those things. We were not sensible. We were not logical. And I would frankly feel better about the kind of the credible thought leaders if they just said, we had it wrong for a little while. The fundamentals, we reassessed our thoughts on the fundamentals. That's more credentializing than saying the rise of being logical and sensible. So just kind of fundamentally bothered me that was one of the themes that came out of it all. Now, it doesn't change the fact that, the things that Mike talked about, just because, our traditional energy system's not being vilified, it doesn't change that, we've got OPEC barrels maybe coming back. Russia's a wild card. Arjun wrote about it this weekend. The demand uncertainties, all those things mean it's still a hard business, and it doesn't mean profits are up and to the right. But it just a reset feels worthwhile, but it also feels like those thought leaders should kind of move stage right because they just had it wrong.
No, it's a really interesting point. Scott, maybe this is a place to start. I've noticed, I was thinking we probably met you in 2017. You would have come to some of our then sort of emerging technology conferences at TPH, and you'd always do a great job, standing up and talking about how the world might really need to develop as opposed to how we hoped it would develop. What do you think, as you've noticed, kind of speaker after leader after company after country, kind of saying, maybe we need to modify some of these. Does it put a smile on your face, or is it kind of annoying that it took a while to get here?
Probably none of those things. There are always going to be people who are very good at representing the obvious. And they have big voices. So they're kind of chameleons. They kind of blow the way the wind blows. And so that's been happening now. Fatih Birol, I called him out in the last panel. For the last several years, oil and gas are dead, no more investment. And he really kind of created that scenario around which it was tough to get investment, particularly in Europe, but even broader than that. And this, at CERAWeek, he said, no, we have to have investment in oil and gas. And there was a caveat to replace reserves. Well, that's always been 70% of why we have to have oil and gas is reserve replacement. That's what fields do, they decline. That's physics. So, and he said full stop, and people clapped, I think. And, okay, it's welcome back, Fatih. But he's blowing the way the wind blows. So I'm with a picture with J.D. Vance. And so there they were. And he would never have been seen with J.D. Vance in the last few years. Even some of the organized, there's some big people at universities and things that are publishing now about oil and gas, and they've been anti for a while. I don't really worry about those people that follow the trends and the money. It doesn't influence what I think. It probably doesn't influence what you think, man.
Do you think in situations like this is, because I think one way to interpret some of this is, the wind starts blowing in a different direction and people realize that and they go that way. But another one is a lot of times leaders are kind of being handed a script by somebody, and leaders, now someone like Fatih Birol should know different, but we have people in leadership positions who've been kind of handed a script and been told this is the way the public wants you to go, and so they're not really sitting down and saying, well, is that really the right answer, or is this are we showing institutional? Is it part of the weakness in institutions that we don't have leaders thinking enough for themselves in some of these things?
Could be. We got to probably separate different institutions.
Yeah.
If I'm an elected leader, I'm going to follow the vote. That's his prime directive, get reelected at lots of different levels. And so you can see a 3-month, 6-month, 1 year, sometimes 2-year cycles in that, and what's popular today with my voter base, and that varies by region as well. Industrial leaders, they could afford to show a little more courage too. They've got stockholders and stakeholders they deal with. And I would say my friend Amin Nasser, who runs Saudi Aramco, known forever, had lunch with him in DC a month or so ago. He's been very courageous. I'd say he's been speaking truth from his perspective, and it kind of aligns with what I think, so it's got to be true. But he's been very courageous, but he runs Saudi Aramco, and yes, it's public, 5% of their stocks are owned by other people. It's basically a big state company. As you come down through the leaders in the oil and gas sector and even other energy sectors, a little less. Mike Worth's done a pretty good job at Chevron, I think, and that kind of thing. The independents, they really could get crippled if they say something that their stockholders don't like. It could go very bad for them. So I understand some of that, not wanting to put your head up. Come to the academic institutions, having been at one the last 25 years and industry 17 before that, there's not a lot of surprise out of most of the academies. They tend to lean green, if you will, whatever that means. And And there's a lot of pushback in institutions now at higher learning about a lot of the things they went too far on, DEI, ESG, and other things. That said, in the final session at CERAWeek on the last panel, I talked about those things. And so we still need diversity and equity and inclusion. Of course we do, just not as a tool. And of course, especially people who don't have as much in the world, the environment around them matters tremendously. Soil and the water and the air and social systems. Can I have maybe a school or some healthcare, governance? These things matter. They just were weaponized and used as tools, and you didn't hear a single DEI or ESG. I never heard it in any session at CERAWeek. And a few years ago, everywhere, right? So these pendulums swing. So where are the courageous institutions? They all have stakeholders that they have to cater to, and it's harder to find voices of courage that, whether they're right or wrong, speak consistently about what they think and adapt with time. I mean, none of us are brilliant, but you see these longer term trends, Maynard. And I really appreciate those who have been willing to voice some of this courage for a decade or two.
Do you think, as you think about it, I guess one way to think about it, we observe this is, the world is always overdoing something, right? There's always the trend of the day, and we're always kind of, whatever that direction is, we tend to overdo it. Mm-hmm. So maybe in that sense, this is less concerning about our intellectual honesty and just part of a habit. But do you think there are things today, when you look at today's world, where you go, why aren't we talking about that? Or what is today's sort of awkward truth that we're not facing?
In the energy world?
Or maybe more broadly
globally?
In the economy or globally? Yeah. I mean, you're sort of the captain of awkward truth. I don't know if you like that label or not, but in a good way, you always highlight, hey, why aren't we talking about this? So do you have new thoughts on?
Yeah, they're not new. I think this remains an awkward truth. I think the awkward truth is climate is not the most important issue facing the world. It doesn't make most people's top 5. When I say most, 7 billion, maybe out of 8.3 billion wouldn't put it in the top 5. A lot as you go down that, from the developed world to the developing to the emerging, they wouldn't even have it in the top 10 economies. Climate just is something else they have to deal with. That's a little awkward. What's even more awkward is the reality that our social and economic position globally, the whole populace continues to expand with a bunch of people anchored. I'm down here in poverty, not much income, not much energy, and the rich world just keeps pulling away. So it's very awkward when you think about how that ends, when you see that kind of economic and social disparity in the past in countries. It ends in revolution every time. Eventually, people rise and say, we're done with this. And so globally, as that happens, it's the most important issue of our time, is to unpin the billions of people. And it's a continuum. It's not haves and have-nots. There's a continuum in there. But to kind of catch the slinky up, and let's get moving here again together. And I think if we don't figure that out really soon, a lot of other things get very ugly.
Well, we've often wondered, like the COP conferences, and just, it felt like if you were a good old-fashioned economic development, kind of almost a Peace Corps person from the 60s, you would have been looking at this world of the last 15 or 20 years and saying, why can we just talk about economic development again? Can we talk about jobs? Can we talk about water? Can we talk about food? Because we did get highly focused on climate as the key issue, and it seemed like it was pulling resources away from other economic development issues. Are you finding that in the community of people who focus on global development in places where they have less, are they excited about kind of the way the world is changing? Can you feel them? Is that happening?
Yes, I've been fortunate. I've been in over 60 countries. not in airports, I mean, into them,
Yeah.
and seeing the hope, especially the emerging and developing world, they're very hopeful. Addis Ababa, there's just a buzz. Nairobi, now, it's a buzz with growth and building and people seeing their future. People that haven't had much in the past, they don't have a lot today, but the future is in front of them, and they see the potential for what they can become. I can point out places in Latin America, Southeast Asia, other places that are equivalent to that. So there's hope there for the future, as opposed to what's the sort of antonym to hope is fear. So the wealthy world, the developed world, young people seem to be quite fearful of their future. Mm-hmm. And there was a brilliant campaign that went on, and climate was the tool around that. But it went beyond that to put fear of our physical world into the hearts and minds of particularly young people, but everyone, to the point where, and I lecture in universities a lot, 4 or 5 universities a year, and I don't pick the easy ones. They literally have said to me, why does any of this matter? Humans are gone in 15 years anyway. I said, what do you mean gone? They said, existential threat, dead. Humanity's gone, 15 years, 1-5. And I got depressed, and I would say, why do you think that is? And so this is a very successful creation of fear, and fear is a very powerful motivator. So when you're fearful, and then you start to look at the mechanisms around why capitalism was used as the progenitor of some of the bad things going on, and democracy, they took it further, et cetera, as these are the reasons these things are all bad, we're over-consuming the planet, and nothing matters. Well, it's just not the case. We have to be careful of some of these things and be thoughtful of our resources, but we have the resources. There's a big challenge here, I think, to bring back to logical thinking, civil dialogue, critical thinking, the trade-offs in all of these different spaces, Maynard, that play out. The environment, very important in the economy of the world, and the energy that feeds that economy. That lovely overlap space I've always called the radical middle. How does it really work? What are the trade-offs in that space? And I feel that we're starting to gather back towards that again. And if the word pragmatic means that, or practical, or whatever, good. Let's kind of come back and think about the actual real trade-offs here.
I love what you said, which is a better, to your point, Jeff, is a better way to think about pragmatism instead of that phrase. The kind of reigniting our critical thinking, whatever the issue is, and reigniting our ability to agree, disagree, throw the facts on the table, and try to dispassionately figure out what's going on.
Have civil dialogue.
Yeah.
Just let's talk. We don't have to agree on everything.
That description you just gave of the world, which is a fearful young people, or too many fearful young people in the Western world, and then in the developing world, a sense of, hey, maybe we're toggling back towards development, maybe we're toggling back towards, I can do what I want with my fossil fuels and my energy and empowerment. That's such a different view of the world. I was thinking, if that clip of the picture of the world was on social media everywhere, there's a large portion of the world that would say, what? Is that right? They just don't have that vision of the world. I'm just curious what you're...
Who would that be, do you think, that would
I just feel like there's a large mainstream that would probably say, wait a minute, the US is killing USAID, and the US is disengaging, and we've stopped caring about climate, and gosh, we're all pulling in our horns, and everybody cares about their own national security, and people have stopped caring about the rest of the world. Like, there's an image of the world that is that people would look at and say, oh gosh, this is terrible, as opposed to, hey, we're going to encourage these countries to develop their energy systems, and hey, we're telling our young people, stop being so fearful, and we're returning critical thinking to our universities. Like, those are very different constructs of what's happening today. I was just really struck by it.
Yeah, you see in the world, the whole world, commerce at all levels. Let's just say that. And I've never really met anyone who wants just aid. Just sit here and give me aid. When the aid goes away, I'll go back to being unaided. Every human wants to strive and reach and endeavor to grow and succeed. Everyone. They would like investment that's affordable so that they can invest in systems and create a virtuous upward cycle of commercialization and capitalism essentially at play here. And I'm talking about in all the socialistic and communistic societies as well. Go into the regions of China, go into the regions around the world and see what's happening as people strive to grow their worth. And it's a very powerful motivator. People feel good when they build something and succeed at it, not when they're given something. I think that's a universal constant with humanity. You can't keep it down. When it's kept down too long, Tiananmen Square. I mean, we could just go on and on through history of the uprisings that happen when you try to keep the spirit of people down. So I don't feel that it's different. What I do see is the emerging and developing world are now starting to get some resources. China brilliantly, through Belt and Roads and other initiatives, has invested in many places around the world and helped build infrastructure and create systems where the local communities can grow. Now China's taken their chunk of flesh. It might be the processing of all the metals, it might be the owning of the rails, it might be citizenship, and there's other things going on there. Nothing is free. But when you start to see that kind of investment in human growth, it's very powerful. So I worry, I don't know what we want to call it, the West, the global North, the rich world, pick your favorite, the billion of us that were kind of born into the economic lottery. I worry that we could become irrelevant as the rest of the world just continues to strive. And here we sit with good intentions perhaps, but almost policies that are keeping the world down. It's a very strange form of economic colonialism in which we say, no, we can't develop those resources because we'll wreck the climate. You can't develop those oil and gas and coal resources because they'll put CO2 into the atmosphere. They will, and it'll warm. But think of all the positive things, the trade-off world that happens around the economic wherewithal to be able to then adapt to climate change. Maybe I get an air conditioner. Maybe I get some heating or cooling or some insulation in a home, or better food, better water, the things we all have. We're in Houston, Texas. It's not chilly outside, but we're very comfortable in here. The world knows this. The first thing people get when they get a 40-watt panel on their roof, and I've put them in the Maasai in Kenya, literally in a little metal shack with a family, and a giraffe walks by in our films, you'll see it. We didn't plant the giraffe there, that's where we were. 40-watt panel, boom, cell phone. Everybody, cell phone. Everybody in the world now is connected, and they know what the world looks like. There's no more secrets. And a good friend of mine, Magat Wade, who wrote a wonderful book called The Heart of a Cheetah and testified to the House not long ago, said when her parents had to leave her in Africa to go to Europe to try to be safe for 5 years from the age of 2 to 7. And when she rejoined them safely, there was a shower, a hot shower. And she used to describe what a shower was like to her, which was her grandmother gathering wood, starting a fire, boiling water, a 45-minute process, putting it into a thing that would drip on themselves and clean themselves occasionally. Here's a hot shower. And the thought in her head was, why haven't I had this? Why don't we all have this? And she goes, maybe a bad thought, Scott, but why doesn't everybody in the world have this? We all should have this. We don't want to be a little less poor. We want to be wealthy too, everybody in the world. And that's a very empowering thought. Not a little less poor, not a light bulb in a damn mud hut and call that electrified. That's a light bulb in a mud hut. That's a brownout here, you know. It's a whole different level of wealth, Maynard, that is required, I think, and has been earned. And that's what people are striving for. We better get our heads around this, or Europe's fine, you know, the great museums and churches to visit. They'll always have good tourism. I don't know about the US. What are they going to come visit here? We're in a little different place, but
We
let's
better
not.
have a good energy policy. We don't have all the good stuff to visit,
Yeah,
or as much.
yeah. A lot to unpack in that, though. Yeah.
Scott, we were at Sarah Week last week, and you were on one of the panels with Toby Rice, EQT Corp, and you introduced this new vision that you have out there, this 50-50-50 vision. Maybe talk a little about what it is, you know, how you can, you know, it really kind of feels like you're really going after those 7 billion people that want to kind of get out of poverty, want to get to, you know, and to develop, you know, country status. I mean, maybe talk about how the vision came together, what you guys are trying to do with it, and where do you think it's going to go over the next 50 years?
Yeah. Toby's a great guy. I've enjoyed putting this together with him. A lot of passion, a lot of energy and courage in many ways. I'm a data guy from way back. I'm a geologist. So when I was tearing apart the data, the energy data at the end of last year, like I usually do, and spending weeks growing a beard and, you know, not showering, hidden away in northern Michigan, started thinking more about the population of the world and what those future demographics look like, and the world's economy. And I host a PBS show called Energy Switch, 2 guests on every episode, and we had one on population. So that really set my thinking there. You pull all that together, and what you see coming is something I don't think most people have seen yet in terms of population demographics. We're at about 8.3 billion people in the world today. We were at 1 billion in 1804 when the first steam locomotive went commercial in Wales. And that kicked off the coal, oil, and gas era for a couple hundred years. And we went from 1 billion to 8.3 billion in a couple hundred years, just over. Where's that headed? When you look at the fertility rates in the world per country against wealth, so fertility rates and wealth, the wealthier you are, the lower your fertility rates. And it's not just a little lower, it's a lot lower. Fertility doesn't drive wealth. Wealth pulls fertility rates down. You choose not to have kids for the most part. You don't need them. In the last 30 years, fertility rates have fallen in all major countries. India went below replacement a couple years ago. It doesn't mean their population rolled over. Their fertility rates are below 2.1. What that means, unless things change completely like they've never changed before, is in the next 50 years, population will peak around 2075 globally. The actual population, not the rate, the number of people. And it doesn't plateau for 100 or 200 or 300 years or 1,000. It plummets. It plummets back to about 2 billion people. Took 200 years to go up from 1 to 8, 200 years to come down to 2. Demographers and economists are terrified. So are certain leaders like Xi Jinping, who are paying people to have kids now and they still won't. Japan, blah, blah, blah. So when you look at that 2075 number, that's 50 years. Not that far, I won't be here, but my kids will. And we set that as a North Star. Okay, how do we get from here to there? 50 years. The next thing was, what are the world's, if you clump the world's economies together, what do they look like on a GDP against energy consumption, energy against GDP? And it's a very clear trend. There's scatter. But it's very clear, the more energy you have, the more wealth you create. The wealthy world sits up here with about 1.3 billion people in it, and we have an average of, conveniently, 50 megawatt hours of consumption and $50,000 of GDP per capita per year. 50-50 in this 1.2 billion of us. And the US is higher than that. Now we have people in the US way below 50-50. I don't want to represent that. It's just kind of the average. The developing is around $15,000 and, you know, sort of 25 megawatt hours. And that's 3 billion people. And then 4 billion people in the world have 5 megawatt hours at $5,000 per year. Average, which means, you know, Not that smart, but that means about half is less than that, There's your average. It's not even a cup of Starbucks a day. The GDP for 2 billion people in the world is less daily than that cup of Starbucks. So we look at that and say, all right, let's not make people a little less poor. What would it take to get everybody on the planet up to 50-50 in 50 years? 50 and 50 and 50. That became our North Star. It's kind of catchy too. So it came out of my brain and a bunch of spreadsheets. And I started running the numbers then on the energy that would take and what the mix might look like. It's a lot of energy. We're at 620 exajoules a year today, 620 TCF. We'll go to 1750 plus or minus to do that, almost triple the amount of energy in the world. You can play with the mixes however you like. I happen to feel it's all going to be needed. But coal, even with, if you look at the energy mix, the percentages, coal keeps coming down %, oil down %, everything else grows in percentage terms, but in actual terms, with that kind of demand growth, coal doesn't plateau till about 2050, oil after that, in real units, and gas and nuclear and everything just expands out there. So we have a lot of work to do. This is, you asked earlier, what are some unexpected things? That's one. There's a tremendous amount of work to do to create the capacity and the energy and the infrastructure to empower the whole world that way. We have the resources. We're not resource shy. We just have to create the investment and the creative intellectual approaches to do that around the world. And I believe we can. I'm a absolute optimist about that. We have to remove a few barriers of fear that are preventing us from seeing that kind of flourishing. But it changes lives so much. When you look at what 50 grand and 50 megawatt hours would do for every person, it just changes lives in ways that are untold, including adapting to climate change. So,
what you're describing there, in your analogy to Maynard, that we need the slinky to catch up.
yeah.
So you're kind of describing it there. Where we sit today is that slinky, does it have the best shot of catching up? Is it those on the bottom pulling themselves up? Because I worry a little bit about what you mentioned, the fear that is, in the wealthy world, doesn't feel like we're pulling them at this point. Hopefully we're at least, stymieing them, but how do you see it?
It's a wonderful thought. I was in London a month ago now at the ARC, Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. Interesting thing we could talk about. Very interesting. But I rolled out this 50-50-50 thing in a really poor 12-minute talk. I don't recommend it. I tried, but the slides blew up and I blew up and everything was laughing and it was great. But anyway, we introduced it. At lunch that day, some folks from Europe said, in accents that I won't try to repeat, great accents, do you really think there's enough resources in the world to do this? And then the question kind of led into, I will succinctly summarize it in my own words, who would make all our crap? I mean, Asia makes our stuff today. Asia consumes half the world's energy, and they produce more than half the world's stuff, and we ship it here. We buy it cheap, they make coal, and solar and wind and LNG, but a lot of coal, so cheap. Who would make our stuff? Kind of a colonialist thought, wow, I'm just processing.
Kind of self-aware, maybe, I don't know.
It's very self-aware.
Reasonably self-aware.
Who would really make our stuff? Is there enough stuff to go around? What would happen to inflation? These are all good questions. I'm not criticizing that. This is very real, but what's the option to that is this kind of disparity. So I started just a few talks ago showing Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the bottom is physiographic needs. And then there's safety and security. And then you kind of go up through love and other things to self-actualization. Well, look, nobody has a patent on that stuff. I've seen some pretty self-actualized, very poor people in Gunchuco, Colombia, and other places. But those bottom two, that pyramid on which everything's built, physiographic, safety, security, I know those are made better by energy and wealth. You can improve your circumstance. So that's what Energy Core is about, is trying to help build this bottom part of the pyramid on which everything else can become self-actualized. I'm very hopeful, given the response we're hearing, that people see that as a different North Star than a fearful one. Net zero by 50 means we keep everybody down. We can't consume as much energy, as opposed to, no, we're going to consume a lot more energy, but let's create the systems around which to do that, and that allows us then to protect the environment. And that's always the kicker with me. I've been talking about this for decades. Energy allows for healthy economies. Economies invest in the environment, not just the climate, the land, the air, and the water. We have the cleanest air in the world because we regulate it and we clean it up. We can afford to. Clean water systems, et cetera. A lot of the world doesn't have those things and they can't afford it. You know, they dump their crap in a lake just like we used to. They dump stuff into the air, like pollute the soils. It takes wealth to do those things, and wealth creates systems of government that allow those regulations to happen, and it's virtuous. So I'm very hopeful. I wish I could live longer. You know, it just pisses me off. Damn it, I gotta die. You know, someday here. I'm on Medicare now. It's looking it in the mirror. But I'm very hopeful that we'll figure this out, and it won't all be in agreement, but we'll stop the artificial almost imposition of anti-growth. Now, after 2075, that would be fun to be here. What are we going to use as measures of success, good quality, when it's not growth? Because as humans go from there to there, there's still a lot of, there's some good things to that. Less resource stresses, potentially, a lot of good things for the earth. There's a lot of challenges to our current way of thinking about what means success than today, and it'd be wonderful to be a young economist, in 2075 who got to win a Nobel Prize thinking about what matters in that kind of a decreasing population world.
So what do you observe? You are such a world traveler and thinker and exchanging ideas with people around the world. What would surprise us about some of the conversations you've had lately, whether it's Europe or Latin America or Asia or Africa? Like what's out there that maybe we don't appreciate?
Kind of almost, where do you start with that? I'm going to start with a conversation that might be a little unexpected. I haven't told too many people about this one. When we went to Gunchuco, Colombia, the Arhuaco people, northeast Colombia, right on the Venezuelan border, in the Santa Marta area, the mountainous region. The Arhuaco people have been living that way for 500 years. They were pushed into those mountains by the Spanish when the Spanish came to South America. Mud huts, thatch roofs, agrarian, up in the hills, come to a village center to gather, fires, and no electricity. We brought first solar at their request. We went a year early. We were baptized in the river. This is all in our film and all in the PBS series that followed that, one of the special episodes. And we're invited back to bring solar PV. Not pico hydro in the river, which would have been great, sacred waters. Not tap into that power line 4 miles away. That's different people's energy and electricity, blah, blah. Solar PV. So we did that. The first day we were there, we were no electricity, so we're sleeping, sweating. It's hot. It's summer there. I think like February. Into my tent and my son's tent comes a couple people from the village to gather us and take us. It's dark. It's 4 a.m. Okay, well, where are we going? Maybe this wasn't a good idea. And all the village is all walking up this hill. in the dark, kids and elders and mamos, chiefs, and things. We walk with them to a little clearing, and that's being generous, in the canopy where a fire was going and everybody gathered. And for several hours through double translation, I was told as the leader of our group what the value of the earth, of Mother Earth, and what it means to them. And I listened carefully, and very humbling experience because they are so close with Earth. And then I was presented near the end of it a document that they had written for me to sign, committing to protect the Earth. And I'm kind of signed a lot of documents in my life. I don't sign anything that I don't feel like I can actually do, and I couldn't make that commitment. I couldn't commit to protect the Earth, the whole Earth. And my son's looking at me like, what the hell are you going to do, Dad? And I said, I can't sign this. I said, and we hadn't started our install yet. I said, but by the end of the week, we'll write something that I can sign, So it was very meaningful. We all came down in the daylight and we went through the solar install, put in a 3.5 kilowatt array, half of a Houston home, light bulbs and mud huts, ceiling fans and a refrigerator freezer. And then the last day we went back up, and none of this was filmed because it was sacred. They never had any white people in that place before. So I had written something, and then we had translated it, committing to communicate about saving the Earth through film and other ways, to communicate that message.
Do you see over time, as you build out the Energy Corps, that you'll be pulling a lot of young people or people of all ages? Like, what might the organization? Because in a way, it feels like it's got the spirit of the Peace Corps with the knowledge of energy systems embedded in it, and it's
Right.
going to go make some difference.
Right.
What will it look like? How many people will it draw? How can other people get involved?
Yeah. I don't know anything yet. We're building the airplane as we fly. We've got some good thoughts and infrastructure in place. It has an education arm, which is Switch. Has an action arm. The action arm initially will partner with a lot of organizations. We're not here to try to do it better. We're here to try to engage and enable and accelerate what's being done by other groups around the world. And there are a bunch of them.
Like, who would be an action arm that comes to mind?
That we could partner with?
Yeah.
Okay,
just
so
thinking about
like Chris Wright's Bettering Human Lives, who's putting propane tanks in places in Africa,
Okay.
Solar Electric Light Fund in Africa. There's groups that I know that are putting in solar panels and water pumps for agriculture, Solar Sisters. There's literally hundreds of these groups, some
Gotcha.
not as successful, some. We want to invest in them. Now, 2 requirements that are different. One, you got to measure. Measure what? Okay, we have 6 human flourishing goals in Energy Corps that we've kind of pulled out of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, but modified them a bit. And each one of those are a human component that have energy tied to them, different kinds of energy potentially. So we want to measure the impact on humans. Okay, if you're putting in cleaner cooking, let's put in a air quality monitor in every hut and every house and show that it's getting better. How many refrigerators, how many solar pumps, irrigation, how much agricultural yield is growing, vaccines, the kinds of things that matter. We want to measure all those. So if we invest in you with money and or talent, because the Switch Alumni Network, we have hundreds of kids around the world now in literally 50, 60 countries that have joined this alumni network of ours that want to be boots on the ground. They want to go do things. So if you get that, you're going to measure. And the other thing you have to do is show a path to commercialization for whatever it is that's going on there. The entity, the region, the village, the bigger country, they want this. Like the Arhuaco people, they wanted solar, not hydro. They want it, and they're going to commit to growing it themselves. Just a path to commercialization. so that the investment becomes actually an investment, not aid. And Maynard, it probably won't be a lot of gifts, or that it'll probably be microfinancing of some kind, low interest rate loans. They'll pay them back. They're very good at that. People who get that kind of confidence and investment, they structure to pay that back. They commit to that. They're very good at it. So that's kind of on the accelerate what's going on side. And then a bigger picture would be these energy lines that Toby thinks about. Whole new lines of energy from A to Z, companies, et cetera, bringing something new, whole cloth, to a region, and helping to lay the energy infrastructure to do that. But that's going to require good partnerships with governments who might need to help build the roads, or the wires, or the trains. Companies that probably build the pipes, et cetera. So again, not top-down money that gets just sadly stripped out before it gets to where it's needed. Bottom-up money that can then raise up that economy, if you will, with the people that are in it. So a path to commercialization, measuring, and then full energy lines that are commercial is a bit of a different approach than what we've seen. I haven't seen everything.
Yeah.
But
Do you think that type of approach in a world where, as you were saying, even places where people are very poor, they have access to a phone or they have access to the internet, does that mean it's possible to do micro solutions at scale?
yeah, it grows quickly. I mean, I could give you countless examples. Nepal, we're in there looking at indoor smoke, and propane was an obvious one. We take you to a propane factory, filling them up, and then on a truck, and then I ride a bicycle with 2 canisters in the back to the last mile, myself. There's your supply chain, and the gas is coming in from India. Okay, what else though? Well, there's biogas systems, and they all have livestock and human waste. They don't have and we do that. We show you what the biogas systems. And then there's induction cooktops, because there actually is electricity. You don't need it on that often just to cook. And these induction cooktops are expensive, $40 or $50. But every market we visited on the side of the street, and we take anyone in the film and in the market, they're all selling them now. They weren't selling these 3 or 4 years ago. This is a whole new product. It creates wealth in that vendor who invests it back into things. And now I have cleaner cooking. So I'm not in the hospital with my kid dying of pneumonia or cancer or getting cataracts from the indoor smoke. I'm a woman and a child with more time and less disease. And so blah, blah, blah. In Ganjukwa, they started selling to pay for the battery stack, which is going to wear out. They were selling popsicles out of the freezer. And then the village elders were gathering the money over 15 years. My wife and I bought the battery stack to be able to replace that, because they committed to do that. In Kenya, we go to a home of, we call him Farmer John. His backyard, which is walled, and he had a house, wasn't fancy, but a home, which is filled with incredible vegetable garden. You can see all in the film. Like, this is arid Africa. I think they were 80-watt, 2 80-watt panels, a well, and a pump. And he had his sprinkler irrigating his backyard way more than he needed, so he takes that to market now, sells it, and now he has wealth that he never had. More people have food that they never had, and he's investing in the community. And there's a huge aquifer there, so it doesn't take that much base investment of energy, and not gifts. He knows how to fix that panel and the pump. He's invested in it. It's not somebody else dropped it in and the switch blows and you don't even know what to.
Yeah.
So this is. I think it could actually accelerate. I can give you lots more examples like that. Yeah.
Well, yeah. One of the things I was just thinking about is you start out the conversation. You talked about in your view of the world, coal peaks in 2050, oil thereafter. But each of the anecdotes we have solar, and so I think it's it's great and fulsome in the discussion. So it's more just a comment I observed. But you've talked about the radical middle. I just like that concept, because most people don't fall at the ends. What observations would you have on the radical middle here over the last 3 or 4 years?
Yeah.
What direction have we gone? What's the mindset?
Right. It's funny. If you Google energy radical middle, I'll be all over it, right? I just saw a book from a guy at Pickering on energy called The Radical Middle. Right. I said, wow, that's a nice title. Whatever.
Well, this is where I was starting in the beginning. Like the world has, the percentage of people thinking like you have been thinking for a while, it's gone up.
Yeah, and it's great to write a book.
The Tinker Files
for a second,
growing.
I was like, what the hell? That's my title. I've been talking about it, I wrote about it, but go, let's take it. Last 3 years, I think you're seeing more environmental reality. So instead of a carbon only, we've come back down off of that, and you're broadening it into some land, air, and water dialogues again on the environmental. The radical middle, let's define it. Energy, environment, economy, it's that overlap space where hard work has to happen and compromise. It could also be thought of in different ways, but so that's happening. I think we're starting to see more economic development. So not just the rich world over on the economy side, we're starting to see all countries are moving to the right, which is good. On the chart of energy and the economy, everybody's moving up and right, just not very quickly. But you're starting to see wealth created, so that's good. You're moving closer into the middle. And on the energy side, we got sort of at least vocally limited in what we could do with investments. You all know this better than anyone. Hard to raise capital for fossils of any kind for a while, but not anymore. It's starting to come back. I'm a big fan of diverse portfolios on the energy side, and I think we're starting to see that happen. I love that we've added solar, wind, more robust biofuels. I think we're seeing nuclear come back. Young people aren't scared of it. China and Russia are building a pile of new nukes, gigawatts. I think we're really going to see the SMR world take off here. I was talking to Chris Levesque just last week at TerraPower. They're going to have first electricity in 2035. John Hopkins is a good friend at NewScale. They're working on things too, others. I think we're going to see that happen, and not just here, probably not here first. Nuclear comes back into the scene. Oil and gas and coal stay. They got to gas to coal ratio growing, more gas than coal, gas to oil ratio growing. And both of them, gas to oil is around 70% globally now, gas to coal is 85%, still up and to the right. So in the fossil world, they're not all the same, more gas than those things. Hydro keeps getting built. China's about to build one bigger than Three Gorges by quite a bit. Incredible, and that was the biggest power plant in the world. This one's gonna be bigger. China has some advantages. They just move whole villages and dam up a river, good luck here. Like villages the size of Houston. and a movie over here, it'd be fine. We'll get more electricity for you. And if you don't like it, well, you're moving anyway. So that's happening with hydro. Geothermal has a lot of headroom, and not so much pressure, I don't think, on solar and wind and batteries only. They're fine for where the resource is good. But every one of the things I just described is a resource. Geothermal is good some places, not others. Coal, oil, gas. Solar is good some places, not others. Wind, uranium and thorium for nuclear, not everybody has it, blah, 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 blah. So quit trying to force this almost binary approach to energy. Let's look at the portfolios that make sense, and they're more robust. And luckily, they do different things at different times. When the wind is great in West Texas, awesome, and then the sun goes down and the wind stops, so you don't have sun or wind, you need other things. So let's just keep the reality of energy mixes and partnerships and allies that way. So I think the radical middle is growing, but it's fits and starts, but globally I see it's growing.
Scott, as we wrap up, which is hard to do. One expression I was hearing, we all were hearing last week at CIRA, was this notion of policy durability. And it's just an observation that, and it's been a little bit related to politics, unfortunately, but we will have a certain administration goes this way, the next one this way, next group back that way, next one back this way, and it creates this this up and down. And it's hard if you're an ally of the US, it's hard if you're an energy company, it's hard if you're an investor. Everybody subject to that decision making says, can we just please, choose something? So I'm wondering, do you think the model, we started off talking about all the pragmatism talk last week at CERA. Are we in a pragmatism swing? And in 4, 5, 6 years from now, are we going to be toggling back out of pragmatism into whatever you'd call the previous, maybe that's passion, or I don't know what the opposite of passion. You had some, the thesaurus suggests some other words, but do you think this is a pendulum swing and it's going to swing back? Or do you think something has happened here which is really profound, and this pragmatism environment is going to survive, for a long period of time? Like, I know what our hope is, but what's your thought?
Well, it depends on who you ask about whether this is pragmatic now.
Right.
Maybe more pragmatic in energy, sort of, than the past. In my last panel, I just made up the words literally on the spot. Debt to fret. The prior administration was just $1 trillion. IRA and other things are more debt. That ain't good. That's not durable. Now there's a lot of fret. What's happening? Literally, while we're sitting here, something else has changed. So that's not durable in Washington.
Are you saying something? Do I need to check my phone?
You can check your phone. They'll just stay on me for a minute. But
okay. This is the debt to fret. I think that we just found our slogan for this episode. Debt
to fret. And so I don't think most people think we're in a durable phase of federal government right now.
Right.
Now, I happen to believe as a grandfather that kind of debt, and I want to put some numbers on it, $5 trillion in tax revenue in the US, $7 trillion in spending. So there's a $2 trillion deficit, $36 trillion debt, $26 trillion GDP or so. We have a 7x. If we didn't spend any of our revenue for 7 years, we could pay off the debt. It's like spend zero. It's insane. We can't, the debt service alone is $1 trillion. So I happen to believe we got to get our heads around that and do action, not just whittle away. So I'm not against that, but it's brutal.
Right.
And some of it seems completely unorganized and chaotic to me. And some of it is unorganized and chaotic because it changes the next day as they figure it out. So that's the fret part. I think a little more common sense is happening in energy because it's more of an all of the above. Yes, backing off some of the wind and solar, but not killing all of it. It's just not wind and solar only. So on the energy side, now, will that be durable? Democracies aren't known for durable policy. Unfortunately, autocracies are, and communism and socialism. You want durable? Get Xi Jinping for 20 years or Vladimir Putin. That's durable. Good luck. Knock your socks off. Have fun with that.
I'll throw one at you, though. That was maybe our finest moment, was the durability of the Cold War policies through decades of different administrations. Like, we somehow got our heads around that.
Yeah.
Could energy be that topic?
But Maynard, we came out of World War I, depression, World War II, and the US we were united sort of for the 50s and into the 60s.
I mean, we ourselves, before you got to the Allies, et cetera.
Yeah, but even the Marshall Plan, things that kind of tried to stabilize the world for a while. And the Cold War was very cold, and I remember, you might, getting under my desk in kindergarten because of practicing for nuclear attack.
Talk about fret.
Big time fret.
That's
terrifying.
Real fret.
And we knew that desk would protect me from a nuclear bomb. I knew that
like
I'd walk out of there like, whew.
It's kind of like your mask in the restaurant. If you've seen the Bill Maher routine.
Glad I had the desk. But the hopeful thing now is kids weren't trained to be scared of nuclear war. Maybe they should be a little less sanguine about it, but they were trained to be scared of climate. So young people today are pretty good with nuclear. Most of the ones I've talked to, let's go, no emissions, affordable once it's built. So durable, it's kind of one of those careful what you ask for things.
Yeah.
I worry the pendulum, it's been doing this with the last 5 administrations in many ways, and it crashed through the wall with Biden. He ran on moderate, and then he legislated progressive, bam. And then here it comes again and crashed through the wall over here in the last 2 months. There isn't even a wall. What's happening? It's violating physics. It's got inertia that pendulums shouldn't have. They should kind of slow down. Something's going in there. We need to figure that out in a way that involves more, in Washington, more statesman-like thinking or statesperson-like thinking, right? Where you're not just thinking about your district or your election. You're thinking about the country. That's why we have a federal government. We're a federation of states, and we have to compromise for what's best for our nation and elect leaders who are willing to do that and re-elect them if they do that. If they, not just because they think about my little issue. That's a cultural change. We haven't had to do that for a long time. And I hate to say war drove that, uniting that. In some ways it did. I don't know that that has to happen for it to happen again. I hope not. But I think there could be a movement around something, and I'm not going to say 50-50-50 is it, but when you start to think about even the poverty that exists in our own nation, if we start to address something that's bigger than ourselves, humanity, and really engage in a movement of addressing that, I think it could get legs, and it could grab the hearts and minds of a lot of people.
I think one thing here, what a great way to wrap up. I'm thinking yesterday we had our Veritan Advisory Board, and one of our good friends who'd been previously super involved in hydrogen and a lot of things over the last few years, she's now doing all this great stuff in India. And it's like it comes from this, hey, I want to be doing something, I want to be having an impact. I don't like waiting, I don't like fretting, I like doing, and I want to help. And it's just interesting to watch her channel herself like this, and you're speaking to it in so many ways, that desire people have. Well, I messed up your perfectly good ending, but I was struck by it. What an awesome conversation, and what a great friend you've been to everyone who's been concerned about energy thinking. And it's so hard to take the podium and articulate these things, and I stand by my intro. No one's done it better than you since we started doing this.
Thank you. That's really nice of you to say. I think there are people. You probably need to get out more.
Well, there's no question about that. Guys,
All right.
Dr. Tinker, thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.